just on assignment. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much. You can continue eating. Yes, please continue to enjoy.
First ever Tedx ECFS youth event. My name is Rachel Shames and I'm a senior.
My name is Uma Kaufman and I'm also a senior. And we are thrilled that so many members of our community are joining us today to celebrate the hard work and dedication of our amazing speakers.
Nearly 2 years ago, Uma and I had the idea to bring a Tedx event to Fieldston. As students, we had never seen an event like this before, one where community members could come together to share their stories of personal growth, learn from each other, and engage in thought-provoking discussions.
And as you may know, TEDx youth events are independently organized, meaning that this is a platform for the best ideas forming right here in our own community.
And we would have never had the confidence to put this event together in the beginning of our high school career, but knowing us, we can't resist making things more challenging for ourselves. And we eagerly embrace every opportunity that Fieldston has to offer.
I think every teacher at the school has probably been a victim to one of our many emails at some point or another. From city semester to arts night to filming the fashion show and creating films in film major, Rachel and I have endlessly pushed ourselves to grow in every way we know possible at Fieldston.
And that's why it's so meaningful for us as seniors to leave Fieldston with one final push, a 2-year project with the goal of bringing the whole community together in one single event.
So tonight, we come together in one single theme, metamorphosis. We believe that ideas can transform not just individuals, but entire communities. Metamorphosis can be interpreted in many different ways, and we are lucky enough to have speakers tonight whose talks range from climate change to scientific research to personal growth and overcoming challenges. And if you're curious for more information about our speakers, please take a look at the pamphlets on each table or visit our website for more information.
But what we didn't realize when we had the idea for this event was how many different pieces and people go into putting a TEDx event together.
We want to give a huge, enormous thank you to Ms. Tavares. We could not have put this together without you and your amazing support. Thank you for responding to our emails at all hours of the day and night, and thank you for helping us bring all of this into reality. Thank you to every member of the facilities team, to Les Johnson and the entire tech team, to Sean Senavarotny, Wasima, and Quincy for your help with the live stream, and to the incredible ABI team for putting together this amazing dinner.
Tonight, you'll hear from speakers who embrace change in their own lives and turn moments of transition into opportunities. Their stories remind us that metamorphosis isn't just about reaching a final form, it's about embracing the journey. We are stronger when we collaborate, listen, and grow together.
So as we begin, we invite you to think about this. What is your metamorphosis, and what change is waiting for you?
Let's be curious, let's be inspired, and let's transform together. Welcome to TEDx ECFS!
Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theatres, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the format of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration, and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Javin Gaska, and I'm a freshman. And I want you to imagine this. Imagine you're walking down a street that you've known for your entire life, a place that feels comforting, like home. And then, in an instant, everything changes. We tend to think of life's biggest disruptions as purely negative, as moments that throw us off course. But what if these moments are the very catalyst for life's greatest transformations? 2 years ago, I learned this firsthand, when I was nearly robbed in front of a housing complex right here in the Bronx, in a place I thought I was safe. It was terrifying. But looking back, that moment set off a chain reaction, leading to some of the most profound changes of my life. But how? Let me take you through it. What if I told you that humans undergo metamorphosis the same way the rest of the animal kingdom does? For example, a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly is a delicate, complex process requiring time, energy, and patience. This serves as a powerful metaphor for life's challenges, reminding us that even when we feel stuck, change is happening beneath the surface. Similarly, frogs undergo an equally fascinating metamorphosis. Frogs start their lives as tadpoles, tiny swimming creatures with no legs, a tail, and gills to breathe underwater. But as time passes, the tadpoles undergo dramatic physical changes. They grow legs, lose their tails, and develop lungs that allow them to breathe air. Eventually, they leave their aquatic home behind and live on land. The transformation from tadpole to frog is a complete reworking of how the organism interacts with its environment, moving from water to the land, from dependence on gills to breathing through lungs. Both the caterpillar and the tadpole face a common challenge in their respective transformations. They must break free of the confines of their old selves in order to evolve into something new. We too experience transformations where we must step out of our comfort zones, break old habits, and embrace uncertainty in order to grow. Just like the caterpillar or the tadpole does not exactly know what it will become, we too do not always know where our journeys will take us. We can only trust that change is a part of the process of becoming who we are truly meant to be. Embracing change, however, is not easy. It requires a mindset shift, a willingness to view change as an opportunity rather than a threat. The frog doesn't question whether or not it should grow legs and breathe air. It simply trusts that its body is changing to suit its new needs. Similarly, we need to trust the process of change in our own lives. When we face difficulties in times of transition, we must remember that this is a sign of growth. We can emerge from experiences stronger, wiser, and equipped to take on new challenges. But this growth is not instant. Both processes take time, and often the most significant changes happen quietly and slowly. Sometimes this process can feel frustrating, as I find that we often want to go fast in life and not stop to reflect on the world around us. I practice multiple martial arts, one of them being Brazilian capoeira, and my teacher would repeat a phrase ad nauseum in Portuguese, calma, meaning slow down or stay calm. At first, I never understood why she would say it when I rushed through learning the new techniques. But as I began to slow down and approach each new movement with intention, I noticed a significant difference. Over time, I started to apply this mindset beyond martial arts, realizing that change happens gradually. By valuing and reflecting on each moment, we can fully absorb the lessons from past challenges before rushing into the new ones. But why is change so difficult? Why do we often resist it? Part of the answer lies in the fact that transformation often feels like we are losing something, whether it's a familiar part of ourselves, a comfortable routine, or an old identity. Change can feel uncomfortable, even painful at times, and that discomfort is what often causes us to shy away from it. The caterpillar, for instance, doesn't stay in its cocoon forever, but it must completely break down and restructure itself to emerge as a butterfly. Similarly, we must experience the discomfort of letting go of what is familiar and secure to allow something new and better to grow in its place. This is especially true when we go through personal challenges. Think about times in your life when you face a difficult situation. Maybe it was a career change, a move to a new city, or overcoming a loss. In those moments, it can feel like you are in a state of transition, like you are in your own personal cocoon, unsure of who or what you will become. These moments, though uncomfortable, are often essential to our personal growth. They force us to reconsider what we truly want from life, and to push ourselves beyond the limits of who we were before. They also force us to possibly take risks, and choosing what risk to take, and when it does, induces such an amount of control over your spirit that you suddenly have seemingly endless control over any challenge in life. Every stage, every setback, and every success adds to our growth, shaping us into the people who we are becoming. Just like the frog that can now move between both land and water, we too are capable of adapting and thriving to equipped with new skills and wisdom we've gained along the way. Sometimes we need to do this in order to lead a more fulfilling or comfortable life. Like the tadpole or the caterpillar, we may not see the full picture now, but in time, you will emerge more stronger and more capable, ready to take flight, or leap, like a frog, into the next chapter of your life. Abel Morales, a character from A Most Violent Year, a classic 1980s film, once said, "When it feels scary to jump, that is exactly when you jump. Otherwise, you end up staying in the same place your entire life." Taking control of your ability to change your own personal metamorphosis is one of the many ways you can take control of your life, and mastering the skill can take months or even years. However, taking the first leap of faith is the only way to begin this process. Let's go back to the housing complex I mentioned earlier. How did that moment shape the larger trajectory of my life? Instead of choosing to live in fear of it happening again, I chose to reclaim my sense of control. I returned to martial arts, practicing on the same street where the incident took place. I found myself putting more effort into school, realizing that in an instant, everything can change, just as my safety had been threatened that day here in the Bronx. By the end of the year, I had earned straight A's and even competed in the national volleyball tournament. And look, I'm here giving a TED Talk. All in all, I began taking greater risks in various areas of my life, which ultimately led to greater rewards, opening doors to new and positive opportunities along the way. Rather than letting the bad experiences in life define me negatively, I used it as momentum to propel myself forward, shaping my own transformation. It taught me to live every day like there is no tomorrow, and for that, I am forever grateful. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nathan Rosoff and I'm a senior. So for much of the past 2 summers, I've spent my time working in the lab of Dr. Inez Rogatsky at the Hospital for Special Surgery Research Institute. Dr. Rogatsky and all the amazing researchers in our lab study the pathogenesis of various inflammatory diseases. But in more simple terms, she studies the internal mechanisms and the development of various autoimmune diseases like multiple sclerosis and rheumatoid arthritis. But don't worry, I'm not here today to talk about the research work I was a part of during my time at the lab. Rather, I want to explore what I learned about science in general, the process of discovery, the struggle for funding, and the demand for results, and what the future of the field looks like within the context of our current political climate. And to me, there's no better place to start this discussion than the idea of the breakthrough, the magical discovery often years in the making. Right? For Newton, it was gravity. For Darwin, it was evolution. And for Rosalind Franklin, it was a double helix structure held by DNA. This is photo 51, for people who aren't, might not be familiar. And for our lab, it was this most recent publication of a paper called Disrupting the RNA Polymerase II Transcription Cycle Through CDK7 Inhibition Ameliorates Inflammatory Arthritis. And I know that is a total mouthful. But it was a feat more than 5 years in the making for our lab. And to put this into more simple and more understandable words, we essentially found that blocking a very simple enzyme can impede inflammatory arthritis development in mice and human cell samples. And this brings me to one of the first lessons I learned. science can be quite slow. My time working and learning in our lab showed me just how much time and work goes into each and every discovery, to each paper, small or large. It's a process that takes years of daily work by graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, lab technicians, and a slew of high school and undergraduate interns and volunteers like myself. My mentor, who was an early PhD student, and I, we spent most of our time doing housekeeping tasks. We took care of mice, we genotyped them, and we bred them for future experiments. We isolated cells for later treatment and analysis, and we validated assays for our various areas of interest. And what I learned is that it's no wonder that important questions take years to have a published answer when simple and foundational tasks demand so much time and detail. I realized that as our world has learned more and more, the precision and attention to detail needed to observe new phenomena has only increased, especially when we study molecules and complexes that are microscopically small. Right? The questions that are left are harder than ever to solve. But it's sort of a curse of knowledge, right? And even though this may be the case, the overall volume of published output has only grown and grown over the years. There's more scientists in the world and more research being done. Now, I want to share with you all a quote. It's from Paul Rand and Professor James Evans at the University of Chicago. And they say that science is facing a perplexing problem. Although there are far more scientists today than ever before, publishing research at a faster and faster pace, new and novel advancements have slowed down and not increased. Right? Our world learns more and more every day, but it's harder than ever to solve the most difficult questions. And this can be an incredibly rewarding process when a hunch or a faint idea turns into a meaningful development, but also a very frustrating one when experiments break down and plans that are months in the making fall apart. I felt these emotions on my own much, much smaller scale when my genotyping yielded good results, or a primer I developed worked well in an experiment, but also when these same exact labors fell apart after hours or days of work. And I've learned to embrace this process, regardless of the results, and to understand that in the grand scheme of things, my efforts were never in vain. But unfortunately, the results researchers, who do this more professionally than I do, the results that they obtain through their lab work bears an incredible significance for themselves and their principal investigator. One of the things I saw firsthand last summer was just how political and results-oriented the scientific community can be. As much as science is seen as a pure field, where knowledge and integrity reign supreme, it's controlled by funding and grants, and PIs and graduate students needing to secure their own careers. So last summer, our lab dealt with the loss of one of our grants, and this was a blow of hundreds of thousands of dollars to future research efforts. This forced our PI, Dr. Rogatsky, a leading expert in her field, and a member of grant writing committees herself, to seek additional funding for the years to come, a process which extended well beyond my time there. And while I understand the importance of the system of grants in a world where everything does cost money, I also believe this system can create conflicts of interest. Right? Researchers are pushed not only to make progress and create knowledge in their field, but to publish a competitive volume of work in industry journals to continue to secure funding and advance their own careers through academia. And, okay, so this right here is a paper mill. But obviously, as you probably can tell, I'm not here to talk about, thank you, Mr. Chief, for laughing. I'm not here to talk about paper production. Because in the context of scientific journals, a paper mill is a business which publishes plagiarized, fraudulent, or sort of otherwise unprofessional data, right? And they sell author designations on these papers. And one of the things that I found incredibly shocking is that this global phenomenon is credited with anywhere between 2 and 20% of the total volume of the scientific world's published work. But I'm not saying that esteemed faculty or students at American research institutions are at all involved in these schemes. I'm not saying that this happens at any meaningful scale at the institutions we tend to trust. But there have been instances in which well-respected researchers have been implicated in fraudulent data scandals. Okay, so this is physicist Ranga Diaz, and he was a professor at the University of Rochester until a few months ago. And his area of interest was superconductors, which are materials that electricity can flow through without resistance, and they expel a powerful magnetic field at the same time. And for a very, very long time, identifying materials with the properties of superconductors at room temperature have been totally impossible, despite their potential for use in energy, technology, and transportation. But in 2020, Dr. Diaz claimed to have discovered a room temperature superconductor. And this was a breakthrough he even thought could win him a Nobel Prize. But during the peer review process, many independent researchers raised concerns with his data, and his paper was eventually retracted. In 2022, he made similar claims about a different material once again, but once again, the journal Nature refused to publish his data after collaborators of his raised concerns. And subsequent investigations flagged other papers of his as well, and his thesis, and much of his research is now under review. And although he lost his position as a professor at Rochester, he co-founded a company called Unearthly Materials using the data he claimed to have discovered. And he attracted an incredible amount of publicity and raised millions of dollars. But I don't highlight the story of Dr. Diaz or talk about paper mills to discredit the process of scientific research in any way. I only raise it to say that the field of science suffers from the same ethical and moral dilemmas of any other discipline, and that the pressures of money, personal credit, fame, and career progression should be considered. I mean, just look at the challenges our world is currently facing, right? Climate change, infectious diseases, bird flu. These are all threats which the scientific community is uniquely equipped to tackle. It's important to have faith in research institutions and to continue to work towards breakthroughs. Through my experience in the Ragazzi Lab and the Fields and Science Research Program, I've learned so much about the genes and signaling molecules that we study. But I think I've learned just as much about the world of scientific research as a whole, and all the forces that influence it. As unbiased and simply objective of a field of science is thought to be, I've grown to see that it experiences the same economic, political, and interpersonal pressures of any other space. Now, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Church, who I hear is, in the building tonight. Because he loves to tell our class how he thinks we should all pursue careers in politics if we want to make an impact in the world. And I find it ironic because next year, as I move off to college, I plan to study biology. I want to pursue a career in science and medicine and use my time to help others. But I do see exactly what he means. Science reflects the will of the world we live in. Research requires funding, policy measures, and public support, and a culture oriented to discovery, and to the creation and preservation of knowledge and the truth. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, again. So, thank you, everyone, again, for being here. Right now, I want to present a very special colleague, Ms. Palma Repole. And yes, let's give Ms. Palma Repole a hand. I just want to give her a shout out. It was my first year here last year as a science teacher, and I connected with Palma instantly with the science department, and their support was incredible for me coming into this school for the first time. So Palma, thank you so much for being such an amazing friend and colleague, and I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit about Palma. Palma Repole is currently in her 25th year of teaching science, so let's give her a hand for just that. In the upper school at ECFS, she has taught classes in, you ready? Biology, human physiology, evolution, ecology, animal behavior, ethics, and mindfulness. She graduated from Cornell University with a degree in natural resources, where she learned a lot about climate change. She earned her JD from University of South Dakota, where she worked in the Rosebud Sioux Tribal Court. She is the proud parent of an 8th grader here in the middle school and a senior in public school. So I present to you Ms. Palma Repole.
Hi everyone, thank you Ruth, that was lovely. Well, so on December 7th, 1972, as the Apollo 17 was tearing through space on its last moon mission, a crew member pointed his Hasselblad camera out of the window to capture what has become the most widely reproduced image in history. The very first full-color, fully illuminated image of Earth from space. This image captivated the world, and it became a symbol of the environmental movement. After decades of unregulated pollution that produced burning rivers and Love Canal, things were starting to change. We began to understand that the planet was a system in a finite sphere that supported life. And during this time, the United States passed some of its most important and lasting environmental protections, such as the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the Environmental Protection Agency was formed. And things got better. But if there's one thing to know about our planet, it doesn't stop changing. The systems that sustain life are connected to even greater systems that shape the planet itself, all of which are dynamic. The Earth has gone through extraordinary changes since it first coalesced out of space dust 4.5 billion years ago. But as cataclysmic as some of those changes have been, they've not been random, but rather consequences of a system of cause and effect. So what can the changes of the past tell us about how these systems work? And how is our global drive for energy and consumption positioning us as one of the greatest agents of change the planet has known? I was born in 1969, and I can tell you I never heard the phrase parts per million once in my childhood. As I graduated high school in 1987, I still had no idea what parts per million were, even though that was the same year that the planet would surpass what scientists call the safe level of atmospheric CO2. I started teaching in 1997, and by then I had learned a lot about climate change. It was the year of the Kyoto Protocol, the very first binding treaty requiring nations to reduce their carbon emissions. In 2000, I joined the science department here at Fieldston. And since then, I've been teaching students about the connection between climate and carbon. So how does all this change add up? That's a lot of change in my lifetime. In fact, it's estimated that since the Industrial Revolution, we've added about 50% more CO2 into the atmosphere. Is that a lot? How does that compare to the past? Turns out, it's a lot. The ice core data tell us that the current CO2 levels are the highest they've been in the last 800,000 years. And, as it turns out, CO2 levels in the atmosphere are highly correlated with temperature over that time. Speaking of temperature, this slide is a fascinating look back on the Earth's history of past temperature. Noting that the scale shifts from thousands of years on the right to millions of years on the left, what you can see is that the early Earth is marked by these dramatic swings of temperature, from boiling oceans to miles of ice. But what I found most interesting about this graph is this flat line on the right-hand side, right by the present, called the Holocene climate optimum, dubbed as Earth's Goldilocks zone. This is the period of time that has supported the development of agriculture, cities, industry, and technology. But is precisely the fruits of human civilization that currently put the levers of future climate change in our hands. So what can we learn about the deep past that can tell us about how these systems will play out in the future? Let's go back to a much earlier time, 370 million years ago to the Devonian period. At this time, at the southern hemisphere of the globe, we see this ancient continent of Gondwana, but there's no animal life there. All the life was in the sea. Known as the Age of Fish, the oceans were teeming with these armored monsters called placoderms. The tetrapods, our four-limbed ancestors, hadn't even stepped out onto land yet. On land, however, ancient trees were taking root. 100-foot-tall Archaeopterysts were beginning their ascent, developing root systems that pulverized the rocks, releasing minerals that formed the first soil. These soils quickly washed into the ocean and began one of the greatest mass extinction events the Earth has known. This phosphorus-rich runoff caused spikes of algae blooms which died and decayed in a process called eutrophication. The decomposing bacteria sucked the oxygen out, and 70% of marine life died of anoxia. Meanwhile, The runaway success of these trees sucked so much CO2 out of the atmosphere that the planet plunged into a 100 million year cooling period known as the Ice House. The planet bloomed and then it froze. Okay, well, if drops in CO2 can cool the planet, then spikes in CO2 will certainly heat it. Let's fast forward to the Permian 252 million years ago. At this time, we have the supercontinent Pangaea. It is covered by forests, but it's dominated by a diversity of reptiles, including this one, our ancient ancestor, the warm-blooded proto-mammal Lystroceros, which literally means shovel lizard. Turns out that's actually going to be a good thing. These animals could burrow underground and live under there, which is where they stayed to basically survive the events that are about to unfold. By the end of the Permian, more than 90% of life on the planet is gone. Known as the Great Dying, it began with the volcanoes of the Siberian Traps, an inferno of lava fields that span more than 3,000 square miles, burned for more than 2 million years, and emitted over 200,000 gigatons of carbon. With carbon dioxide quadrupling, the oceans warmed too. In fact, the oceans warmed so much that it brought circulation to a halt. And there was a bacteria that thrived in this anoxic ocean, and it produced a toxic waste product called hydrogen sulfide, a gas so lethal that we can detect its rotting egg smell in concentrations of less than 1 part per million. Scientists hypothesize that bubbles of hydrogen sulfide came to the surface of the ocean and wiped out life on land in its wake, except for that proto-mammal, that was the shovel lizard. But here we are still. The survivors of the Permian would go on to survive 2 more mass extinctions before diversifying into all the life forms we know today. So what are the lessons of these past extinctions? The planet changes. It's a dynamic system, and we are just beginning to understand its complexity. But we know this to be true. Carbon and climate go hand in hand. To quote the paleontologist Peter Ward, whether it's volcanoes or volvos, emitting large amounts of carbon dioxide have dire consequences. In fact, we also know this to be true. The rate at which we are releasing carbon dioxide today is 40 times greater than the Permian extinction period. As I was preparing for this talk, and I was looking up the history of this picture, I realized that as iconic as it is not without its criticism. Perhaps this anthropocentric God's eye view of a detached and solitary orb in a vast emptiness from the lens of a human in space is not the inspiration that we need for facing the problems brought to us by the Anthropocene. Maybe the inspiration for the next wave of change will come from the ground, from connection, from an appreciation that we are part of this dynamic system and not apart from it. Maybe it will look like this. Do you remember what it's like to fall in love with a place? Its mud and its trees and its insects, its secrets and its discoveries. In the words of the Oberlin professor, environmental educator David Orr, the world does not need more successful people. Indeed, it is the relentless pursuit of success that has unleashed this ancient carbon. No, what the world needs, he tells us, are healers and restorers, storytellers and lovers. It needs people who will live well in their place, and it needs people of moral courage willing to fight to make the world habitable and humane. And these needs have very little to do with success as our culture has come to define it. It is not the first time that the planet has changed, and it's not the first time that life itself has driven these changes, but it is the first time that we are the agents of change. We are the trees of the Devonian. We are the volcanoes of the Permian. The levers for change are in our hands. Thank you.
teacher here, and while this next presenter needs no introduction, I was asked to give her one, so here you go. I first met Zaditu Sanders 3 years ago when she enrolled in my modern world history class. She came in a bundle of energy and commitment to the class. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of this bouncy student who often shared images of unusual animals with me. She was an endless fount of questions, which turned out to be very beneficial to the entire class and to me. I learned very quickly that Zaditu was not only a committed student, she had a level of integrity that is unparalleled. She would acknowledge other students' ideas and would build upon them in effective ways. When doing reflections of group work, she had a strong sense of self-awareness and humility about her performances, even as her group members praised her collaborations and contributions. Zaditu's great passion is for art, and she is extremely talented. She turns boredom into creativity, and she can see the intersection between art and academics, and communicates beautifully with drawing and creative projects. So much so that one of her teachers carried with him a project of hers just to show other teachers the exceptional job she had done. Additionally, Zaditu is brave. She regularly submits to art competitions, even when she's not sure she's done enough, though usually she has. She's willing to put herself in positions of vulnerability in order to learn and grow. She shared with me earlier this week that this was her first experience with public speaking. But she decided to take on something she was inexperienced with, just to have had the experience of having done it. That is a bravery I wish I had. I could not be more proud to be able to say, please welcome Zaditu Sanders to the stage.
Hi, as Ms. Johan said, I'm Zoe Saunders, and I'm a junior at the school. First, I'd like to share this quote. Let me win, but if I do not win, let me be brave in the attempt. These words from the Special Olympics athlete Oak capture the essence of resilience and determination. They remind us that true success isn't about victory. It's about the courage to keep going no matter the outcome. When I was younger, my learning disability shaped many of my experiences. I was a lively, energetic kid who struggled to grasp many concepts. Reading, writing, even focusing in general was a huge challenge. My challenges were often in areas where society tends to measure intelligence. For much of my early years, I felt misunderstood by those around me. I was constantly told, and so were my parents, both outright and in subtle ways, that there's things I simply couldn't do, that I wasn't smart enough to succeed. But as I grew, I was fortunate enough to meet many amazing people who believed in me, giving me opportunities to prove what I was capable of. And with their support, I thrived. At the start of high school, like most freshmen, I was still trying to find myself, unsure of where I would fit in. Then, one day in history class, my teacher, Ms. Johan, introduced the Special Olympics Club, and that moment changed everything. The Special Olympics Club is dedicated to hosting an annual event for Special Olympics New York, an organization that provides opportunities for individuals with intellectual disabilities who otherwise don't have access to sporting events and training, with the support they need to participate and succeed. This event allows athletes to compete in an environment that is not only fun and competitive, but also adapted to their needs, one that celebrates ability rather than limitation. Hosting this event each year is no small task. It takes months of planning driven by the dedication of student volunteers and the leadership of Ms. Johan. The process begins with recruiting volunteers through Fieldston's annual club fair. Our goal isn't just numbers. It's about finding people who want to make a difference. From there, club members take on different roles, choosing positions that align with their strengths. And for me, that meant creating posters. I found joy in creating bold, colorful signs that cheered on athletes and made the space feel celebratory. When the day of the event finally arrives, Fieldstone transforms. It's chaotic, it's exhausting, and yet for me it's one of the most rewarding experiences of the year. I'll never forget the first time I placed a medal around an athlete's neck. Seeing the pride in their faces, that moment is irreplaceable. If I close my eyes, I can still remember my first ever event. All the many weeks of planning and preparation finally began to feel real. Everyone, players, volunteers, coaches, and spectators gathered in the upper gym for an opening ceremony. And as the games began, I found myself completely caught up in the moment. This is the heart of the Special Olympics Club at our school, a place where students, athletes, and the entire community come together to celebrate each other. It's not perfect, and things don't always go as planned. But that is part of what makes it special. The club isn't just about a single day or a single event. It's about what we take away from it. You learn to be more compassionate, and not just in a broad, abstract sense, but in the small moments of joy, like when you see someone's face light up because a whole gym is cheering just for them. It also changes the way we see each other and ourselves. When you spend a day celebrating what people can do instead of focusing on what they can't, it changes how you view yourself. The Special Olympics shows how powerful small actions can be. Cheering for a team, screaming your lungs out to show your support, or just telling an athlete you did great can make a bigger impact than you think. We're all part of something bigger than ourselves. This club, this event, these athletes, they have changed me. They have taught me that we're more alike than we're different. That success isn't about fitting into a mold, it's about breaking barriers and redefining what is possible. That inclusion isn't just an idea, it's an action. And through the club, I've learned empathy. Not just by seeing the world through someone else's eyes, but by also standing beside people in their moment of glory. Before that day, working with the Special Olympics, I thought of volunteering as something you did for others. But what I didn't realize was how much of it I would gain myself. The Special Olympics challenges the way we think about achievement too. It reminds us that it isn't about how easily you fit into a box society has created, it's about the effort you put in. Every high five, every cheer creates a sense of unity that extends beyond the games. It reminds us that at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. After 3 years of working for the Special Olympics program, I now see who I am. Not just as a volunteer, but as someone who understands and appreciates in a way I didn't know I could. I know that I'm ready to be a senior leader in the club next year and are ready to mentor others to become future leaders as well. That is why I believe in the club and this organization. Because the people we support were also told that they couldn't, that they were not capable. And I know personally when someone believes in you and gives you the right tools to show that, that can make the world of a difference. So tonight I hope to leave you with this. What if we approach life in the way our club approaches the Special Olympics? What if we committed to lifting others and to celebrate every person's potential without judgment, while being grateful and finding joy in having the privilege to meet every single person? The world is full of incredible people and many opportunities to create spaces where everyone feels accepted and valued. You can be the one to take the first step, and you should, because when everyone is included and given the opportunity to show what they're capable of, we all win. Thank you.
Best friend Uma, man. Where would I be without her? Hi, how's everyone doing tonight? Good? Thank you. So my name is Lily. Do you mind not playing it just yet? Because I started playing field hockey in 9th grade. And we could do a whole speech about those early years, as mom and dad would probably say. And in the very beginning of my junior season, I committed to play at Georgetown University next year. So, thank you, yeah. But where the speech starts is 2 weeks later, when I tore my ACL. I had reached the pinnacle, the mountaintop of my career, and all of a sudden, I was at Hackley. Dreaded Hackley. This game would decide who would be the Ivy League champions. So, of course, I couldn't miss it for the world. And I remember how my legs felt at the beginning of that game. It's a little bit how my legs feel right now, like jelly. And 1 minute and 13 seconds into that game, my mom's nodding because she remembers it, I tore my ACL. I was on the mountaintop, and I fell all the way to the bottom. It was then, standing on the sidelines, I knew and I swore that I would be back. I swore that this image would not be the one etched in history. And later, a week later, when I tore my ACL and they diagnosed it, I went to my room and I threw every article of clothing field hockey related on the floor. And I'm talking socks, shirts, USA field hockey gear, that sweatshirt my grandma gave me for Christmas. I was screaming, I was crying, I was uncontrollable. What is there to say to yourself when the worst happens, when your biggest fear comes true? I mean, for a month I was comatose. I felt like I was sleepwalking. And during that month, I had to work a lot on my strength and my flexibility. And a lot of that I did right here with our trainers at school, Jeff and Carolyn, if you guys know them. They helped me with my physical strength, getting my knee ready for surgery, but undoubtedly, they helped me much more by helping me understand that this wasn't the end of my life, just a shattered fragment of it. I had surgery on November 1st, 2024, very early in the morning. And I remember going to the bathroom, and I was in an IV and a gown, and I looked in the mirror, and I took a good look at the same face that is looking at you guys now, looked a little tired, and the same face that wore my white headband, the same face that used to be flowing with joy on the field. And I looked myself in the eye and I made a promise. I'd get back, and when I stepped on the field, I wouldn't take any of it for granted. Here it is, I told myself, your new goal, your new mountain to climb. And that began with the introduction to my physical therapist, Jess, who would kill me if she saw that photo of her up right now. And I had to learn a new routine. I had to go to a new type of practice. I had to learn to take the small milestones, the small wins, getting full flexion, getting off crutches, walking normally, going up these stairs. But eventually, as you all may know, an ACL injury plateaus. The treacherous recovery starts to take its toll. Milestones fall further and further apart. And perhaps my lowest moment, hi Ms. Moreno, was my 6-month test where they told me I had a large deficit between my right and my left legs. I got in the car with my mom, and I listened to Waiting Room by Phoebe Bridgers 100 million times. And I went home and I cried, and I almost threw all the field hockey clothes on the floor again, but my mom had cleaned those up. We weren't doing that again. And I felt like I had nothing to show. 6 months of hard work, and I thought, here we are. What do I have to do? In those moments, in my lowest, I felt endlessly grateful to have a therapist, one as special as mine. And my favorite story from therapy, which I tell my STS kids every quarter, is my ocean story. Once I came to therapy, I was very upset. Life was too up and down. I had whiplash. And my therapist said, Lily, you need to be more like the ocean. And I said, look, I don't know what you mean by that. That sounds crazy. What is going on? And she said, look, sometimes it's super stormy. The waves are choppy, there's storms, but sometimes it's tranquil. It can change quickly, and that's okay. It's about riding the waves, taking them as they come. And I wouldn't be here without my therapist or that mantra, be like the ocean. And so over the summer, I would go to the gym really early when I was at a program in Boston. I would take the T for people who know Boston in the morning. I'd tap my ID, I'd say hello to the regulars, and I'd get to work. And it's, who are you when you open your eyes in the morning? Who do you want to be? It starts from that moment when you have to drag yourself out of bed. And in that moment, I decided I wanted to not just play again, but I wanted to win again. And I set my sights on the Nice Ace Championship. Put it in my calendar, got all ready, got all excited. But initially, picking up the stick again was really difficult. It was a mental block. But as my therapist, my parents, my friends remind me, it's so much easier to do when you accept help. And so I worked with a coach in the city, I worked with my teammates, I went to the gym with my mom. And even though this was a solo journey, it really wasn't. And entering August and preseason, you can see an early morning preseason photo there, I felt very different from my one all those years ago in 9th grade. And yet, I felt very similar. I still had fears, I still had questions. Could I get back? Would I get back? Would I be the same player? Would I be good enough? And my teammates, some of them are here tonight, and my coach, Diane Toth, who's in that photo right there, a funny one of us, they really looked out for me. They held me to my stipulations. You can only play drills. Can't get fully back into games yet. And what I remember most is standing on the sideline, watching. Or the nights before bed when I would close my eyes and imagine stepping onto the field. And I remember every minute I spent thinking about it because I spent a lot of minutes. And when I believe that when you imagine something like that, when you dream it in your heart, when you feel it in your soul, it's going to happen. I fully believe that. And so my first game back, September 28th, homecoming, almost 11 months since my injury, I was only allowed to play the last quarter. So I jogged onto the field, and the crowd roars. I feel it in my bones. I remember it now. I saw my friends. I saw my teachers. We invited everyone. And I ended up scoring a goal, and the bleachers exploded. Everyone went crazy. But then later, in Spanish class, Senor Spalding said it best. He said, "You know when I knew you were back? Not when you scored, but when you tripped, you fell down, you were splayed out, and then you got back up." 3 days later, my second game back, I had to return to Hackley, the same field I tore my ACL 355 days earlier. There are a few moments in life when it's clear cut. You have an opportunity to complete a circle, break out of a cycle. For me, it was that Hackley game. We were down 1-0. I come in to the game at the beginning of the third quarter. 40 seconds in, pow, left sideboard. And I tear up now, even though I'm not tearing up. I just wrote that, whatever. But I think about that sound, my favorite in the whole world, which I had really missed. And eventually that game went into double overtime. And right before the second overtime, I looked at my mom and I looked at my dad, and then I looked up. And I can still remember the wind pattern. I can remember the sound. I think there were birds. And I remember thinking, how much fun is this? 30 seconds later, I scored the game winner. And we beat Hackley at Hackley for the first time in 11 years. After that, we went on quite the winning streak. One for the ages. Played Hackley a week later here at the Nest, crushed them. Played Riverdale Horace Mann, beat them both, and cemented ourselves as sole outright Ivy League champions. Please. Finally, we made it. The Nice Ace final. David versus Goliath. Fieldston versus Rye Country Day. They were 18-time, 6-time consecutive Nice Ace champions. And there are a few moments of my field hockey career as electric as that final. The game was gritty, it was back and forth, and I kept looking at my teammates expecting them to give up. I kept looking down at my knee, expecting it to just, crumble. And it never happened. We stayed deadlocked. So that game goes to double overtime, goes to shootouts, goes to the very last shootout. And then, on the very last shootout, we won it. First ever Nice Ace championship in Fieldston field hockey history. Shout out this table. But does the story end there? Absolutely not. Still go to PT once a week. I still have to massage my knee. And I've dealt with all sorts of health challenges when following that. What I realize is no one sees the split squats or the stretching or the running or the plyometrics or the blood, sweat, and tears. What I realize is you can climb a mountaintop. You can commit to your dream school. And then you can realize there's only more mountains to climb. And you can never climb a mountain alone. It takes everyone, and it takes everything. I never would have had the strength to do it without any of the people you see. Thank you to my mom, my dad, who drove me everywhere, who gave me hugs. I'm gonna cry now. Thank you to my friends. Some of them are here. Too much, don't make me cry. Okay, I'm gonna wrap up because I'm crying now. Thank you to my teammates. Thank you all for riding the waves with me. Thank you.
Let me try to do this. Hi again, everyone. I am here to present our last but not least speaker. And before I do that, I just want to give a shout out to all the alumni that made it today. So, yes, let's give the alumni a hand. I want to shout out their years. So we have 2019, class of 2019, 2015, 1995, 1993, 1998, 1972, and 1966 here with us. So let's give them a hand. I just met Albert, 2 weeks ago? And he already feels like a brother. He came today. He stayed with us all day. He was at the assembly. He helped Janet put up the signs. He was in my office. He met with students, with Fieldston new students and Prep for Prep students. So thank you so much for being here and for reminding us that alumni is family and we gotta continue our connection. So let me start with your introduction. Albert Garcia, born and raised in Washington Heights, Albert Garcia has spent the last 2 decades working to lift up community voices and experiences, especially that of people of color and immigrants. A member of the class of 1993, he is a proud alumnus of both the Prep for Prep and National Urban Fellows programs. Mr. Garcia has had a career that has included everything from leadership development, work with high school students, and in the city to writing for music magazines like The Source, to web and video production of WNBC and the New York Times. He's worked with powerful elected officials like Representative Charles Rangel and Governor Andrew Cuomo, as well as provided strategic communications consulting to grassroots social justice movement groups in Florida. He most recently served as the Director of Strategic Communications at the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy and CRP, a DC-based advocacy organization dedicated to challenging grant makers to be transparent with and accountable to the communities we serve. But he got his start here at Fieldston, where among many things, he wrote for the Fieldston News, and like many, yes, Fieldston News, and like many, a cross-country runner, spent way too many hours in the hills of Van Cortlandt Park. Allow me to present Albert Garcia.
Thank you so much. Before I start, Fieldston in many ways is home, has always been home. And when I think in points in my life, and moments when things seem uncertain, it always finds a way to bring me home. In moments in my own personal life, or even outside in 2008 when the financial markets were crashing and people were wondering what the world was going to be, for some reason I was here at Fieldston listening to like a panel of like alums talking about what the future looked like. And it's one of those things that it's not in my script, it's not there, but when you find a place that you call home, coming back isn't difficult. And hopefully for everyone in this room, this is a place, if it's not like that, it will be that for you. Change, cambio. My name is Albert Garcia, pronouns he, him, and él. Metamorphosis, transformation, change. This is certainly a daunting subject, even for someone who well enjoyed these extensive devil's advocate conversations that I used to always have in Alejandro Nevon's ethics class. We live at a time when the very core commitments that we have to each other, in school, in government, at work, with our partners, everything seems to be in flux. Everything is changing. Now, change is often thought of in very, very dramatic terms, and you've heard a couple of stories here today about that. And maybe that's only because we only notice it when it is that dramatic. Popular media likes to present it in positive terms, or at least with a happy ending, right? We see, as we've heard, the worm, or in this case, candy worms, go to a butterfly, right? The ugly duckling turns into the great swan. The weakling becomes the hero. But of course, it doesn't always work that way. You have innovative startups becoming massive corporate giants. The plucky rookie turns into the rich and sometimes despised champion. And Anakin Skywalker eventually falls to being Darth Vader. Yet change, no matter where it takes place on the number line, is always constant as pi. The emotion it brings forth can also predictably be at extremes. We know that change can be scary. We've heard it can be lonely, and we can leave you with less than what you've had before. But it could also be beautiful. It could be uplifting. It could provide you with things that you never imagined that it could have. The thing is, when things are moving so quickly, how do you tell whether you're looking at the sunset or the sunrise? I've seen change, personal and professional. Been dedicated to it, been sometimes in charge of it, or at least narrating and communicating it. What should be the keys to our change? For me, I have been blessed to have received and been in the presence of one key ingredient, and that's love. It's on the wings of love that I arrived here at Fieldston. The sacrifices of my parents, my brother, my sister, the great staff and teachers and advisors at Prep for Prep, some of which, like Arthur Whitman and Bob Montera, found their way here at Fieldston. For the most part, a love of exploring and learning was the environment that I found here at Fieldston. And of course, it wasn't just happenstance. I'm sure a lot of work went behind the scenes to trying to achieve this aspiration for as many children as possible. Now, I'm going to be honest. Imperfect in its daily execution? Certainly. Varied results from peer to peer? Definitely. Yet there always seemed to be enough people who cared for both me, my classmates, and the institution. And we were expected to do the same. And so I carried those expectations from high school to college and into the real world, always trying to leave it a little bit better than I found it. And it's great to see that some of those things are still around today. At Columbia University, El Grupo Quisqueñano, the Dominican club that I helped co-found, is still in existence. Our college's Latino Studies program, which we work with faculty design, we passed that. And the University Center for Study in Race Ethnicity, which a hunger strike and various building takeovers in 1996 helped create. It was after that takeover that I came back here at Fieldston and was welcomed with open arms. And years later, I was blessed to find a partner who shared those same values and so much more. So my marriage to this wonderful Puerto Rican woman from the South Bronx, 22 years plus at this point, definitely transformed me. Transformed me to be a better person, but also continues to redefine the purpose and the utility of my masculinity and my manhood. Yet she would say that by far, the single most transformational thing to happen to me to date was not just her, but being a father and being a father to our daughter. Transformational because our Nadia has totally challenged and changed the way I communicate, both personally and professionally. It's old saying, Spanish proverb, or ladies that my mother would always say, hablando se entiende, right? Kind of loosely translated, right? It's through speaking that you can understand each other. Now, as you might can tell, I'm a little bit of a talker. I come from a long line of gabbers. And here at Fieldston, as in a bunch of places, it served me well. And I did a lot of talking and a lot of learning. But one of the things about having a newborn is learning how much you can learn and communicate without words. Picking up on body language, knowing what was a scream of delight versus a scream of despair, a cry of hunger versus a cry of diaper change, a hug of consolation versus what was a hug of joy. But the truth is as a verbal communicator, I just longed to hear my daughter speak. Now, I would catch myself as I would rock her to bed, to sleep, wondering just how she would pronounce those little words. How would she string them together along? What would her voice be like? Now, Nadia, was walking pretty early, 10 months. But it would take a little longer than we initially imagined to actually hear her speak and say her first words. Now, studies show that children who grow up in bilingual or trilingual environments take longer to speak as their brains process two or more languages. We know this. That and some minor health issues meant it took a while for her hearing to actually get on track. But like a lot of kids, once she switched it on, she was on. She was more than a sponge. She was more than a mirror. I don't think I ever anticipated how much of an engaged participant she would be as to what I had to say. Look, one of the first memories I had of Nadia was walking into our master bedroom where she was jumping up and down. Nadia, I started. Get down. Now, I repeated this 2 or more times, each time kind of strategically taking away the joy from my pronunciation. Nadia, I'm more serious. Get down. All right? You can hurt yourself. Still no reaction. Finally, with a little bit of volume, maybe perhaps with a little bit of annoyance, I said, Nadia, stop. Nadia, are you hearing me? And with one quick motion, she stopped. She collected herself, wiped away the hair to make sure it was not in front of her face, and she said, Papi, I hear you. I may not be listening to you, but I hear you. And it was the first and certainly not only her last display of that kind of like mix of wit that when any parent recognizes that you both laugh at and you groan at the same time. And my Facebook feed, they adored it. They loved it, especially because for the next 4 to 5 years, I periodically transcribed this kind of dialogue, right, that captured life from the perspective of my daughter. So here's a couple. I actually did these. If you go on my Facebook page, you kind of read through. Now, some of these I'll just read out loud. This is latest from my toddler. This is 2012. Nadia's about like 2.5, almost 3 years old. Papi, Nadia says. Nadia, Papi, I need some help with this game. Nadia, wait a second. I'm looking for something on the internet. Papi, yes, Nadia. I'm looking for something too. I said, Nadia, what are you looking for? So she comes up to me. She says, Papi, he's got glasses, has short hair, long arms, and he's really, really tall. Have you seen him? The next thing, which I personally like, is, Nadia, if you wash your face the first thing in the morning, you won't feel sleepy. Nadia, Papi, if you let me sleep later, I won't be sleepy. This is also one of my favorites, too. So while we're watching The Return of the Jedi, we're big Star Wars people, we always will be. So Nadia has this like visceral reaction to watching Jabba the Hutt kiss Princess Leia. She's like, ew, Papi, why is this guy trying to kiss the princess? And she's like, oh, yeah, he's trying to convince her she's got no choice but to love him, right? Trying to get an analytical theater critic response, right? But he has that green icky stuff on his lips. Well, Nadia, you're gonna find out that in life, sometimes people who you think are really nasty are gonna try to kiss you. Really? Papi, yes. She's like, well, it's a good thing I don't have to be in that movie if I don't want to. So I admit, I often felt like Laurel to her Hardy, Hobbes to her Calvin, Pips to her Gladys, right? And these are just a mere fraction of all the conversations. Because she didn't just ask questions, she sought out answers. Real good ones, authentic ones, the ones that kind of made sense. The kind that forced you, with all this kind of like language, to actually understand and communicate. And as she got into elementary school, she inevitably began to ask the larger ones, the ones that had real no answer to. Papi, why do good people die? Papi, what's rape? Papi, if I'm so resilient, why don't I feel resilient? But see, here's the kicker. Sometimes she didn't need the answer. She just needed someone to listen as she worked out her answers on her own. A space where she could explore her voice and receive feedback without personal judgment. Where she could be challenged without intimidated. A space where her silence could let her think and not determine or justify her existence. Now, I gotta admit to you, certainly I wouldn't be the first man to be accused of trying to solve a problem when listening was all that was required. And that's something I'm still trying to remember. But what I learned was that by being present, not just in her life, but also in her conversations, that deepened the discussion and the actions that we could take in the future together. And soon, without really much thought, it was a habit that I found myself carrying over to other places. In organizing my professional communication staff, in the work I did in coalitions. And once I began to do that, it became really apparent that the gap that I, and quite honestly so many others, have to bridge in ensuring that we not only fill our rooms with the sounds of diverse voices, but the responsibility that we have in ensuring that those voices have a legitimate opportunity to be listened to and to be followed. Now, I collected over 50 of these conversations, much to the delight of my family and friends. And they are as much as her legacy as they are mine. Which is why, as she entered her tween years, probably for legal reasons, I stopped categorizing and writing these things down. Now, the truth is, that's because I've learned that no matter how much I loved and learned from these conversations, the power to wield these stories is ultimately hers and not mine. Love, and the best of all intentions, is not a blank check for justifying actions, especially when it's connected to exercising power. Now, drawing to a close, and we could be here all day, me talking about how women, both biological and those who choose to be, have impacted my life. And I'm not here to filibuster the evening. You know, folks got to get home and got other things to do. But I leave you with this one thought. For all the joy that I shared on and off my Facebook timeline on raising this joyful, spunky, witty, fiercely loving young person, nothing ever quite prepared me to see how, as she has gotten older, how she has had to engage with a world that is seemingly set up to tear her down. As an empathetic person, as a woman, as a bilingual, bicultural, biracial Latina. Now, as you guys well know, I consider myself to be fairly intelligent. I thought I knew what the world looked like through the eyes of my friends, especially my mother, my sister, and my wife, but just to see how early the world forces her, so many others, to falsely choose between these limiting identities, to see that it makes her instantly fundamentally question her worth, her intellect, her instincts, despite years of evidence to the contrary. To see her joy sullied by the tears she sheds publicly and the ones that she hides. And I know that no matter how much time I spent talking here, that she, so many others, have to live with this every single second of their lives. We benefit from their resiliency, and we benefit from the resiliency of so many others. And we are all the better for it. So, for me, the love of my daughter is both my love for so many people, for my daughter, for so many others, is both my North Star and my engine. It keeps me centered, it guides my action, it gets me back up to work when the world or my own issues try to drag me down. Now, loving something doesn't automatically cure your blind spots. It doesn't give you a PhD in decision making, or it doesn't even shield you from feeling pain or even enacting harm on others. It is not limitless. It has to be nurtured. It has to be maintained. It has to be replenished. And when it rests in an ideal world, it gets to be recharged by things like hope and faith and joy, but also make space for things like discomfort and anger. Now, I'm not here to tell you that love is all, right? It is far from everything in this recipe for change. But I challenge anyone in this room or outside to tell me how you can have a deeply impactful change for the better without it. So as we contemplate these changes that were unfolding before us, I really, really urge you to think about the role that you want or that you need love to play. How will you make your empathy and your care for others real? because we know that even the tiniest act of love can lead to the most fundamental of all changes. Thank you so much.
These amazing speeches, these amazing talks, sharing these ideas, the fact that they volunteered, that we asked if you could please do this, and they said absolutely, of course, we'll do this, that they became vulnerable. I just want to thank them so much. I want to thank ABI. I want to thank my colleagues, every single one of them. I want to thank facilities. I want to thank tech. I want to thank Les. I could be here all night, thank you, but I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you, the live stream people who are seeing this right now.
Yes, Quincy!
Yes, so thank you so much. We want to do a quick hands in. And we're going to say TEDx. And 1, 2, 3, TEDx! Thank you so much. So, everyone, there's cake. There's cake. Thank you so much.
All right, hold space.